economists who also are opposed to Amendment 4 say aren't knowable. Everybody agrees the amendment would have some impact, but how much isn't known, because no on 4 states the claim unequivocally without including the uncertainty. So they rate it barely true. So you see, what we have is just a series of $15 million of propaganda that's beginning to hit the airwaves in television and radio that is focusing to confuse people. Your taxes are going up, jobs are going down. Look at the people that are telling you that. Who's putting the money in? It's the lawyers, it's the realtors, it's the developers, it's the vested interests. And the reason is they want to continue doing what they've been doing all along. Now, up until 1985, all they did was go out and pave the green areas of Florida. Then we have a change and we have the DCA. But even the DCA isn't able to stop it. How many times has the thing gone to the county commission? The professionals say, no, that's a terrible project. The politicians, who are they representing, end up voting yes. It goes to Tallahassee, the answer comes back no, but they persist, and they persist, and they persist. How many projects that have been no, end up getting done anyway? And so, the reality of it is this. If you want a continuation of what we've had in the last 25 years, and look, I'm a practitioner of that black art. I've been there. I was there 12 years as mayor of Miami, 4 years in the county commission, and I want to tell you something. It's all legal, but don't tell me that money has nothing to do with it.
Okay. Well, good evening. I'd like to touch on a few basic points and then respond to some of the comments from my estimable opponent, Mayor Ferre. First of all, every major newspaper in the state has editorialized against the adoption of Amendment 4. The St. Pete Times, the Miami Herald, the Tallahassee Democrat, the Orlando Sentinel, the Sun Sentinel, the Palm Beach Post, papers that have been in the forefront of advocating environmental issues, smart growth, and restraint on development. That is telling you that this is an issue that with thoughtful people sit down and look at the ramifications of what would happen if this is passed. They realize that it's a bad thing for the state, that the cure is worse than the sickness. Number one. Number two, there is this misconception that planning starts and stops at the city council or the county commission. The state has a tiered system of comprehensive planning. And the comprehensive planning, as you all know, is the sort of overall guide for development in a community. It tells you what the population should be, where people should live, where people should work, what intensity of development there should be, where the roads should be, where the hospitals should be, all aspects of life in community. And that's a comprehensive plan, and it's approved by cities, it's approved by counties, it's approved by the state. And then underneath that you have zoning. And zoning are the specific regulations which tell you how tall a building should be, what the exact setbacks should be, the specific density in a particular area, all within the comprehensive plan. In 1985, when the Growth Management Act was enacted in this state, it was considered one of the most advanced systems of growth management in the United States, a model for other states. Has it been perfect? No, it hasn't been. But when a comprehensive plan amendment is passed, it goes through a process. And that process is the city council or the county commission votes on it. The If it's a large-scale amendment, it goes to the South Florida Regional Planning Council, which is a multi-agency, which gets to comment on that as well. And then it goes to the Department of Community Affairs in Tallahassee, which passes on its comments and can object to it as well. If you look at the last cycle of comprehensive plan amendments in Miami-Dade County, and I ask Commissioner Sorensen to correct me if I'm wrong or give me the specific statistics, the large majority of proposed land use plan amendments that would have allowed development outside of the urban development boundary were rejected by the Department of Community Affairs in Tallahassee and ultimately have not been adopted by the county commission. So a system that is not perfect, but a system that has a lot of safeguards along the way. And if you want someone who has real expertise in this area to address it, we have Jim Murley, who was Secretary of the Department of Community Affairs. So there is a system of safeguards, and we have to realize that. Additionally, what this will do, this is a true situation of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are many good projects, and Commissioner Sorensen touched upon it, particularly when you look at smart growth and the principles involved in smart growth, which is the densification of urban areas, servicing them with transit and putting your population and your work centers connected to transit, which requires denser development. When you look at the principles of smart growth and the application of those to our cities and throughout Miami-Dade County, the revitalization of inner city neighborhoods, bringing people back into the city, taking them away from the suburbs, you will hurt the ability to bring about this change and transformation. I will give you two examples very close to home, which probably would not happen if Amendment 4 was in effect at the time. Number one is the Midtown Miami project. It was an abandoned rail yard. It needed a comprehensive plan amendment to change its uses and to allow what's called a regional activity center. That process, and I'm intimately involved with that project from its inception through the present day. That project, that process takes about a year. Sometimes it takes longer than a year. If that did not happen, Midtown Miami could not have occurred. And the 2,000 plus jobs that it has created, 80% for inner city residents, and creating a vibrant neighborhood where an abandoned rail yard once existed. And I will tell you, and this gets to the question about Tony Villamil, and I've quoted his study, I think his $34 billion is short. I think the economic impact on the state will probably be far greater, perhaps incalculable. Because I'll tell you, the developers of Midtown Miami, if they knew that after going through a process, changing the land use, going up the city, the regional planning council, and the state, changing the zoning, doing everything else, then at that time it would have been subjected to a vote, they wouldn't have made the investment in the first place because of the uncertainty, the investment in time and money to achieve a result through a professional, thoughtful process, and then the uncertainty of subjecting it all to a vote. That will chill investment in this community like nothing else we've ever seen. This is not Chicken Little. The sky really is falling if Amendment 4 passes. One other example close to home that I will give you as well. The University of Miami Life Sciences Center could not happen without a land use plan amendment. It's being built today. The first building is being built there. I would tell you that it is highly likely, probably almost a certainty, that that would not have occurred if the company from out of state that was investing, which invests nationally in these kind of life science related facilities, if that company was told the same thing that I just portrayed to you would have happened with Midtown. Go through a year-long amendment process, then go through the zoning changes and everything you need, and then subject to a vote. So the kinds of critical industries we need would probably not be happening, and there would be no investment if that passed. And I see Helen standing here, so it means I'm at my end. I want to just respond to two things that the mayor said. Number one, with respect to Theodore Roosevelt, one of the things he stood for as the leader of the progressive movement was actually the city manager form of government. The idea being to take the management of government out of the hands of elected politicians and away from elections and put it into the hands of professionals. And finally, I'd like to finish with this quote. Mayor Ferre is almost as widely authored as Theodore Roosevelt and Thomas Jefferson. And so I took a little bit of time to do some research. And Mayor Ferre said this in 1983 in the Miami Herald. Mayor Ferre sees nothing wrong with the city's haphazard planning and zoning. What determines things in a free society is the marketplace, says Ferre, describing the force behind Miami zoning. That's the thing that people don't want to understand. Those who are great believers in the 5-year planning cycle, in the planning of buildings, of cities. If you want to live in a planned society, go to the Soviet Union. Mayor, that is one of the many things Mayor Ferre has written. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, good evening, and certainly in defense of my compatriot here at the table, I will tell you that I have some 40 years in working for the City of Miami government, and during that time, Maurice was a mayor during that period of time, and in my humble opinion, it was one of the last times that we had a progressive mayor that was involved in the city and what we see on Brickell Avenue. And a long way from the Soviet Union, I might. The issue on the newspapers not endorsing, I don't think it's too difficult to figure out. All you have to do is look and see who is advertising in the newspapers and who is, keeping afloat a media that is in its death throes. When you think about what's happening in the printed media today, and this individual did, or have the station in dealing with this issue than this individual does. This is an individual by the name of Nathaniel P. Reed, long one of Florida's most respected conservationists and a former Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in the Nixon and Ford administrations. And he has endorsed Amendment 4. He is well known for his work in 1,000 Friends of Florida and is Vice Chairman of the Everglades Foundation, and deeply respected for his thoughtful and reasoned approach to conservation in Florida. He has served 7 governors, most recently as Chairman of the Commission on Florida's Environmental Future. His statement reads, I have pondered the pros and cons of Amendment 4 for months. I have listened to expert land use planners and attorneys who warn that the amendment is not perfect and might have unanticipated consequences. I have listened to the proponents who are dissatisfied with the obvious consequences of the existing system. They have been repeatedly ignored by their elected officials who promised careful consideration of development plans and then allowed projects that are unsound and will cost the existing taxpayers a fortune. As I have traveled the state, I have seen the cost of bad development decisions by local government who have made Florida the foreclosure capital of the nation. I am struck by the continued efforts by the development community to convince county and city officials that they can restore Florida's economy by doing more of what made it crash. The suggestion that Amendment 4 will cost the taxpayers money is laughable when you look at the untold millions the current system has cost us. Overbuilding has left Florida's economy in shambles. It is a major reason that property taxes have skyrocketed. It is the single biggest factor in uncounted environmental damage to Florida's